Welcome to Webinale and the PHP conference. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here. I'll spend a moment just introducing myself, and then we'll move on. But my name's Betsy Hoover. I'm here from Chicago, Illinois, and so happy to be in Berlin. I spent a lovely day in the city yesterday, and it was great. But I was involved in President Obama's re-election campaign as our director of digital organizing. And I call myself, when people ask what I do, I say that I'm an organizer first. I'm really interested in people and how we bring people together, and ways that we connect with people and build relationships with people and empower people to build relationships with one another. And a couple of years ago, it became very clear to me that you cannot do that in today's world without understanding what it means to do that online. And so my focus shifted from a more traditional campaigning approach, organizing in communities and face-to-face organizing, to digital organizing and thinking about how we leverage technology, how we leverage our digital tools to help people build relationships, help people engage in their political system, help people engage with one another and take action on issues that they care about. And so in 2012, that meant working on the Obama campaign, where I worked with an incredible team of people and learned a huge amount. And today I've started a firm of my own with a bunch of former coworkers, also current coworkers, but called 270 Strategies, where we do exactly what you all are talking about here. We are not just a digital firm. I run our digital department, but we're also a grassroots strategy firm, we're a communications firm, we're a data firm, and what we bring to our clients is this integrated approach. How does digital and field and communications and data, how do those things fit together? And how do you build successful organizations, successful campaigns, successful efforts, bringing all of those things to the table? And so I'm going to start out with that this morning. We'll talk for a few minutes about some of the things that I've learned, some of the takeaways I have, and where I think we're going in terms of digital strategy, in terms of the tools that we have available to us and are becoming available to us with all of our skill sets at the table. So we start out talking about the fact that media is changing, and this is no news to anybody in the room, but 15, 20 years ago, we had the media was much more controlled. We were able to say, thought leaders, organizations, politicians, brands were able to say, this is what people will hear and understand about me, right? I will put this out. It's transactional. I will put this out on television. I will put this out speaking in a room like this. I will be the messenger and people will receive my message. But as we all know, that is changing. That's no longer the reality. It's no longer the way that people receive information. We don't just go to the television for someone to tell us what to think or what a brand stands for. We look at Twitter, where everyone's a thought leader, right? Everyone is influencing how we understand brands, how we understand efforts, how we understand campaigns. And we're receiving that information from lots of different sources. And so that requires us to communicate differently. It requires us to plan differently. It requires us to leverage the tools that we have in a different way in order to reach people in a way that makes a difference to them, that is actually reaching them where they are. People are online and offline. We don't distinguish, right? I don't say, here's my online self, and I'm receiving information online over here, and here's my offline self, and now I'm receiving information in a conversation. No, we're receiving information online and offline all the time. And so the more seamless, the more integrated that communication can be, the more effective we're going to be. So we are challenged, the people in this room are challenged to meet people where they are. And to build campaigns differently. One of my favorite examples here, dating back to the re-election campaign of Barack Obama in 2012, is about Reddit. How many people are familiar with Reddit or have participated in Reddit? Okay, so this is a platform, it's a conversation platform that's very popular with people like us in the US and here as well, it seems. But it's also a place where when we were thinking about an electoral campaign, the people who participate in Reddit are the people who are hard to reach, right? It's young people, it's transient people, it's usually liberal people, usually Democrats, but they weren't coming to our website, they weren't on our email list, we were having trouble finding them. And one of the things we really needed them to do was to register to vote. And so we were trying to think of how to find these people, and the president said, I'm gonna participate on Reddit. I'm going to do a forum that's called Ask Me Anything, which is a pretty risky forum for a head of state to do, right? He gets on for an hour, and anybody can ask him any question that they want to. It's totally unfiltered, right? And so this is risky. People could ask things that make him look bad, that are uncomfortable to answer. But he made the decision that he wanted to participate on Reddit because that's where his people were. So he went on Reddit. He sat at the computer. He actually sat at the computer. One of us was in the room with him. He answered these questions. People asked him questions for an hour. He responded. He reached an audience that otherwise he had been unable to reach, but who very much engaged with him on Reddit. And there's always this question of, well, did that make a difference? Do you know if that made a difference? How do you measure the success of an effort like that? Well, in the middle of that session, the president posted a link to our voter registration tool and encouraged people to register to vote. And at that moment, 30,000 people registered to vote. We actually broke Reddit. Reddit collapsed, which doesn't happen very often, because so many people were on the site and clicking on this link. And it was a reminder that when we committed to meeting the people we wanted to find where they were, rather than pushing them to come to us, we could be effective. We could reach outside of our normal audience. And so this is what we need to do. These are the campaigns we need to build. These are the organizations that we need to build. We need to meet people where they are and build organizations a little bit differently. And so I'm going to spend a minute here talking about that integrated approach, right? It is not really effective to say, okay, here's what my technology department is going to do. We're going to have a strategy, and we're going to go and we're going to build the tools that we want to build, and then we're going to push them out to the world. But to not have our technology department talking to our communications department or talking to our marketing department, because the marketing department's the one who's going to help get people to that tool, right? Your communications department is the one who's going to help talk about that and frame how we're going to use those tools. And so instead, we need to back out and think about the values, the mission, the strategy, and the tactics of our holistic organization, of every part of our organization, and build our campaigns, build our organizations from that point. So I'm going to spend a minute talking about that. Values. This sounds like a mushy word, right? It's something that we don't dive into all of the time because values, that feels kind of up and lofty. But I actually think it's critical. And it's critical that everyone in your organization on every level can communicate what your values are. This sign right here, this was the hallway of the Obama campaign headquarters in 2012, was this long sign here. And what it says is respect, empower, include, and win. Our values on the Obama campaign were respect, empower, include. Everybody knew that. From the thousands of field organizers and volunteers working in states across the country, to the head of our technology department, to the head of our digital department, to our campaign manager, if you said, what are the values of the Obama campaign? Any one of us could have said, respect, empower, include. And in fact, it was so important to us that everyone understood that it's the first thing we all saw every single morning when we walked in were those values. We also included our mission there, win. Because on a campaign, if you don't win, then there's no reason to have values or strategy or tactics or anything. You need a mission. Your mission was to win. And so our values and our mission were outlined for us every single morning, and everyone was confident in those on every part of the organization. If what you were working on in a day didn't get us towards those values and didn't contribute to that mission, you should stop doing it, because that's what we were all working for. And that was really important in having a unified approach to everything that we did. So then you can talk about strategy. And again, I don't think your strategy is just about one department or just about one area of expertise. Your strategy has to be across the whole organization. So for a campaign, we said we have 3 phases to our strategy. We needed to build our organization, we needed to find and talk to our people, and we needed to meet our deadline, right? Whether that was our voter registration deadline, whether that was election day, everyone was working on this strategy. Everyone knew what phase we were in, and everyone knew what their job was within that phase. Again, at every part of the organization. Here, then, we can start to break down into our departmental strategies. And this is where we really get back to digital strategy and the core of what we're talking about today. But I think it's really important that we realize that is in the context of larger organizations almost all of the time. And if it isn't, it ceases to be effective, right? We approach things holistically. People are online and offline. And we need to make that experience as seamless as possible. But now we'll dive into the digital strategy because that is what we're talking about today, and that's what all of you are experts in. So I think there are 3 main pillars of most digital strategies, and I'm going to talk about this from a campaign perspective because it's what I know the best. But I know that this applies with little tweaks to companies, to brands, to lots of other industries. And so bear with me as I put it in a political context, but think about how this might apply to your work. So the 3 core pillars of any digital strategy is messaging, organizing and engagement, and then fundraising or selling your product. It's only after we develop that strategy, those values, that mission, and that strategy, that then we can talk tactics, right? That's when Google Glass and responsive design and email and social media, that's when those things have value to them because you've defined how they work in the context of what you're trying to do. So I'm going to dive into each of those pillars of our digital strategy that we talked about, the messaging, our engagement, and then selling our product. And we'll start with messaging. So where does your message come from, right? And this is different depending on, again, what industry you're in. But in a campaign, this comes from polling. This comes from deciding how we want to frame our opposition. It comes from responding to attacks. But the point is there's one core campaign message. There's one core organizational message. Then we think about how we get that message out, right? We get it out on TV, video, earned media. And this is where we get to email, online advertising, the apps that we build, the design, the graphics that we put out there that people respond to, all of the ways that we communicate with people. But again, this comes from our core message. This is the same message that every other part of our campaign, every other part of our organization is also trying to get out. How many people followed the yesallwomen hashtag this week or last week? Not really. Wow. Okay. All right. A couple. All right. Well, so here's what this was. This was really big in the U.S. I'm being culturally dense here, but this was really big in the U.S. There was a horrific shooting in California a couple weeks ago, and the man who shot a bunch of innocent people left a manifesto afterwards that was really derogatory towards women, and basically blamed women for his craziness and eventual suicide, which was awful. But the response that started was this Yes All Women hashtag. And I don't actually know where it started, which is it goes back to our media is changing, right? I don't know who the driver of this was. There were multiple. But within 2 days, over 1 million people used this hashtag. And what it was doing was shedding light on the fact that all women experience, while obviously not to the level of extremes that we unfortunately saw in California, all women experience treatment like this from men. And this isn't male bashing, but it is to say this was an incredibly important narrative, and hundreds of thousands of people found a voice by using this hashtag. And the thing that was amazing to me was how quickly it spread, right? I hadn't really been following the news. I was traveling last week. I knew that this shooting had happened, but I wasn't particularly tuned into all of the details. And like all of you, I was sitting on my smartphone and looking at Twitter one day and was like, oh my gosh, what is this conversation that started? Where did this come from, right? And so you do a couple searches, and this list of tweets that included this hashtag just grew and grew and grew. And there wasn't a consistent, often you see oh, everyone in politics is talking about this thing, or everyone in marketing is talking about this thing, and it's very siloed. It's very specific in terms of where these Twitter conversations are coming from. This broke through that, and literally, it was impossible to figure out what the source was. It was impossible to figure out who was pushing this. There was this organic message that spread in a way that that was really remarkable to me. And so I did some thinking on my long flight over here about where this came from. Why did this work? Why did this resonate in a different way? And there are three things, right, that I could come up with. One, a thing happened that we were responding to. A thing happened and people were mad about it. People were sad about it. People were scared by it. And they were looking for a way to take action. They were looking for a way to respond. And this gave it to them. Two, it was easy. Right? It was a really easy thing to participate in. Our barrier to entry was incredibly low. All you had to do was tweet using this, your little 140 characters, right? But the impact of it, because it was so large, because there were so many people behind it, was awesome. It was impressive, but it was very easy to participate. And so that was the third thing. People crave being part of something bigger than themselves. And this gave them a chance to do that, to add to a national and international conversation about an issue that they cared about. So we were responding to something, we gave people an easy way to take action, and we showed people that it was a larger conversation, it was bigger than themselves. And suddenly 1 million people were participating in it. I'm in awe of this campaign. I'm in awe of what happened in the past couple of weeks. You should read through the hashtag on Twitter if you have a minute today. So the last thing here is social equals speed. When I started participating in politics, we used to talk about the 24-hour news cycle. And that is a ancient term at this point. We're talking more about a 24-minute news cycle. And social media is a huge part of that. And if you're not part of the 24-minute news cycle, you're going to get left behind. One of my favorite examples from this from 2012 was we have 4 debates over the course of our presidential cycles. Did you guys watch any of the debates from 2012? Do you remember any of them? No, it's fine. Why would you watch the debates? They're usually pretty boring. But the first debate that happened between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama did horribly. It was the worst day for me in 2012 of any day that happened. He was horrible. And he's usually a pretty good speaker. And I'm only saying he was horrible because he says that he was horrible. It was horrible. It was a disaster. And afterwards, our team got together and we discussed what to do, and we talked about how we were going to frame the message, and we had this long conversation about what we were going to do the next day. It was about an hour-long meeting at about 10 at night, and we get out of the meeting at 11, and we realized that we were way too late. We had already missed the boat. The message had already been defined on Twitter in real time and within a half an hour after the debate. We had already missed the boat. We had already lost the debate. The message was out there, and we were too slow. So we didn't do that again. The other debates, we did a couple things differently. First, we helped our candidate do better, which he did. But second, we had an aggressive social media strategy that started 2 hours before the debate started and went throughout the entire debate and long into the night afterwards. We never lost that message war again in a debate because we were much more prepared. And it was a really important reminder that social equals speed, and if you don't move quickly, you've already missed the boat. All right, second pillar, organizing or engagement. This is my favorite pillar. I spend the most time thinking about this pillar. I love this pillar. So organizing is about building relationships, online, offline, anywhere line. This is about building relationships. This is about talking to people, meeting people, giving them a way to engage, being authentic. Couple core principles as part of engagement online. First of all, every action should have an ask. How many people are familiar with the concept of a ladder of engagement? Wow, okay, a couple. Great. Okay, so the ladder of engagement is an idea that every action should have an ask, and that those asks should be strategic, and they should move people up your ladder of engagement. So here's an offline parallel, right? If I walk up to you, after this, and I'm like, oh, I would really like to get to know you. Seems like we have a lot in common. We both work on this internet thing. So let's go out to lunch, and then we can go out to dinner, and then I'll go home and meet your family, and then we can go on vacation together, and then you can move back to Chicago with me. It'll be so fun. You'd be like, you are a crazy person. Like, get away from me, right? Okay, so if instead I'm like, oh, we both work on this internet thing. It seems like we have a lot in common. Let's go grab a cup of coffee after this. That's not quite so scary, right? We'll grab a cup of coffee. We'll stand out in the lobby. We'll chat for a while. If that goes well, then maybe we'll grab lunch later. Maybe, 2 weeks from now we grab dinner, that kind of thing. So that's much less scary. It's asking something that's strategic, that's comfortable, and it's moving to a higher level of engagement over time. The same thing needs to be true with our digital strategy, right? If you hit people over the head and ask them to do huge things that take a huge commitment of their time, of their money, of their values, very quickly, they're probably going to run away from you. But if you give people an easy ask, if you invite people to participate in a way that's easy, the barrier to entry is low, you're much more likely to get a response. And we see this all the time, right? This is a design principle, this is a strategy principle, this is a messaging principle, and it's hugely important in organizing. Moving people offline is the hardest part. Who agrees with this? Great. Yeah, I agree too. This is really hard, right? And we still haven't quite figured this out. We're getting there. Things like mobile phones, things like wearable technology gets us there because it clouds that line between online and offline even more, right? But if the thing that you want people to do is get off their couch or leave their house and come to an in-person event or spend their time doing something that they wouldn't otherwise do, that is really hard. And it's also really important, right? It's the highest impact actions. It's better for us to have this conversation sitting in a room together, right, than for us to only have this conversation over Twitter. It's great if we're also having this conversation over Twitter, but getting people in the room together, there's no replacement for that. And so thinking about how we move people from online action to offline action is incredibly important and very, very difficult. And I think that it's one of the most exciting things about the challenge that our industry has as we move forward, and the ways we use technology, the way we make that jump on our ladder of engagement a little bit easier and a little bit less scary. I spend a lot of my time thinking about this piece. So the last thing I'll say on online organizing or engagement, and then I'm going to play a little video so you can stop listening to me for a moment, is that online organizing is a set of principles, not tactics. People often say to me, Betsy, the Obama campaign had $1 billion. Of course you could engage people. You could build your own technology platforms. You had a massive digital team. You had a massive technology team. Of course you could do this online engagement stuff. What am I supposed to do as a small under-resourced campaign in Alabama? Or what am I supposed to do if I'm a startup and I'm just getting my feet under me in terms of building a platform? How am I supposed to think about how we engage people and these really minute tactics? So online organizing is a set of principles. It's not about the tactics, right? It goes back to our values. The values of online organizing are empowerment, participation, using technology as a force multiplier, and relationship-based organizing. If you think about these principles, then this applies to you. And it can apply to brands, it can apply to platforms, it definitely applies to campaigns and advocacy organizations. But it's about principles, it's not about tactics. And so it's important to think about what this means for you and how this translates into the work that you're doing. So the last principle that I believe really strongly in is that people want to be part of something. People are craving the opportunity to engage. And if you give them a way to do that, people are going to respond. And so I'm going to take 1 second and play my favorite video from 2012. Bear with me.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America. And standing up with courage, they somehow managed to change the world. Yes, we can.
Barack Obama has won the Iowa caucuses.
You have done what the cynics said we couldn't do.
He's the first candidate we've ever seen who had an organization that brought together the internet and community organizing.
He makes me care, and he makes me want to get up and go and do something with my life.
The next Vice President, Joe Biden.
I move Senator Barack Obama be selected by this convention as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States.
Small-town mayor is sort of like a community organizer, except that you have actual responsibilities.
A fist bump, a pound, a terrorist fist jab?
Fist bump, please.
Oh, yeah.
First shot, straight through. That's how you perform under pressure.
After a hard-fought battle, it all boils down to today.
11 p.m. on the East Coast, and we have news. There will be young children in the White House for the first time since the Kennedy generation.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
And so it began. He faces a severe economic crisis at home and an increasingly dangerous world abroad.
I don't know how passing health care will play politically, but I know it's right. We are going to get this done. We are going to make history.
The most persistent fly I've ever seen. Nice.
Now, where were we?
I signed this bill for my daughters and all those who will come after us. So in love. We are not a nation that says, don't ask, don't tell. We are a nation that says, out of many, we are one. This is done. The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. One of the first decisions that I made as president was to save the U.S. auto industry from collapse. I am sending this Congress a plan called the American Jobs Act. You should pass this jobs plan right away. This is a make or break moment for the middle class and for all those who are fighting to get into the middle class. Welcome home. Welcome home. If you stick with me, we're going to finish what we started in 2008. America, we have come so far. We have seen so much, but there's so much more to do.
So that video, thank you for bearing with me on that. We made that video on the 5-year anniversary of when President Obama announced that he was going to run for president for the first time. And the reason that we made that video was because we'd been doing really well. We'd been raising money. People had been signing up to volunteer. We'd been doing all of these things. And then suddenly people kind of stopped responding. And it was clear that they were not quite as excited all of a sudden as they had been before. And this was, let's see, in June of 2011. No, 2012. So it was 7 months before the election. People weren't really tuned in yet. They felt detached. We didn't know who our opponent was. There was a Republican primary that was going on for way too long. And they needed something to be excited about. They felt lonely. They didn't know what they were participating in, and they forgot why. And so we got together and said, we need something that's gonna remind people what they're part of. And so we made that video telling our story, right? Giving a picture of what people had participated in for 5 years at that point. The response to this video was crazy. Not only did a ton of people watch it, but people watched it multiple times. And when we would travel around the country, when we'd go to field offices, we'd talk to field organizers, we'd talk to volunteers, and they would talk about this video. They would like show it at their meetings. They'd be like, whenever I get sad, I watch that video, or whenever I have a hard day, I watch that video. It resonated with people. It reminded them what they were part of. It reminded them of the relationships that they were in. It reminded them of their movement. It gave a bigger picture. And that's really important. Those moments are really important. And we're lucky because we have all of these different tools that we can use, like video, like photos, like graphics, like, even experiential sites and apps that give people a sense of something bigger than themselves. And it's really important that we use that because that relationship matters. It pulls people in a way that words on a page or facts on social media or, a sale on merchandise or things like that can't do. And it's an important part of engagement and an important part of organizing. All right, so I'm gonna move to our third pillar, which is fundraising. And this could also be sales. So I know that not all of you are in organizations that fundraise, but I wanted to spend just a minute on it because I think it's really important, and I also think it's a real opportunity space that a lot of us are spending our time right now. So in 2012, we had a really massive fundraising program that did really, really well. The Obama campaign in 2008 was the first campaign in the US to really think about small dollar donors as a huge part of where our budget was going to come from. And the main reason for that was because when we started, we were a long shot candidate who didn't have the Democratic establishment on our side. So most of the big donors, most of the people that were largely funding campaigns, they were working for Hillary Clinton. They were working for somebody else. And so we needed to figure out a different way to get the funds that we needed. So we decided to start asking everyday people, asking voters to participate. And so this worked in 2008, it worked again in 2012, and then we did have the big donors on our side, but we still said this is an important part of who we are and what we do, and it's an important way that people participate, and so we're gonna keep focusing on it. So in 2012, the Obama campaign had 4.5 million donors online. We raised $690 million over the course of 18 months, and the average gift was $54. Which meant that every single donor mattered. You didn't have to be able to give large amounts. Actually, that $54 really mattered, and it's where the majority of our campaign funds came from, and it allowed us to run the campaign that we did. Couple notes on fundraising, but this really applies to kind of the overall consumer experience, and I think applies to the internet overall, but we'll use fundraising as our lens to talk about it. The first one is the culture of testing. This was a huge thing for us in 2012. It's a huge thing in the work I do now with other campaigns and organizations. But here's an example. So we tested, this is one email, and we tested 6 different versions of this email with a couple different subject lines per version, okay? And we had a pretty large list, so we could do this and actually have it be statistically significant. We spent most of our segments talking about this contest that we were doing to come and meet Barack and Michelle. But we decided to try one version, version 6. And the subject line was, I will be outspent. And the subject was about the fact that Mitt Romney was going to spend more money on his campaign than Barack Obama. And for the first time, the candidate that was not the incumbent would outspend the incumbent. And this message really resonated. In fact, it resonated so much that it performed 256 better than the lowest performing segment, which meant that out of this email alone, we raised $1.8 million that we wouldn't have raised if we had sent the lowest performing segment. This is a little extreme. This is a lot of money to come from one email. All of our emails did not do this well, but it is a reminder of the fact that if we had decided not to test, if we would have just sent what we thought was going to do well, we would have left $1.8 million on the table. And instead, we tried something different, and this time it turned out that that really, really worked. And so this culture of testing is something that is hugely important in any organization, was definitely important in 2012, but there's huge, there's 250% differences to get across the board in terms of figuring out what works. Here's another example. Currently, we work for a PAC in the US called Ready for Hillary. It's getting ready for 2016. We recently redesigned their website, and we tried a different donate form than they had before. We switched it to be this multi-step process. They used to have one page with lots of fields on it that you had to fill in. It looked kind of scary when you got there. But we changed it to this 3-step process. So this is the first step. This improved their conversions by 15%. This one switch. And now they're seeing that when they send emails, they're seeing that when organic traffic comes to their site, 15%. And we got to this by testing lots of different iterations and finding that this one worked the best. So again, that's out there for the getting, but it requires this culture of testing to actually make it happen, which I think is hugely important in really building. One of the great things about the internet is we actually have data. So we can actually look at what works, and so it's important that we use that. Couple of rules to live by in terms of raising money. First, make giving part of participating. Again, people want to be part of something. They want to feel like what they're doing matters. And so whether that's buying a product and then showing that you bought it, right? Whether that's giving to an organization, making it part of participating is a really important piece of increasing that conversion. Second, optimize. Again, talked about the culture of testing quite a bit, but the smallest tweaks can make the biggest difference. Another thing that we learned in 2012, which is so weird, is that on our donate pages, the larger we made the president's face, the better. So we'd have a picture, and there'd be a cute picture of him and Michelle, and we'd be like, oh, that performed better than the last one. And then we'd try a different one that was obnoxiously close to his face. A massive part of the screen was the president's face. It was like, please don't win, please don't win. And then it would win. And so then you have to use it. So optimize, never stop optimizing. There are no dumb ideas. Sometimes you might have that $1 million idea. So everyone should be part of thinking about how you test and what you test. And then the fourth thing is don't be afraid to ask. Money can be a touchy subject. People don't like to give their money. It's uncomfortable to ask people for money. If you don't ask, you will not get the money. So ask. When you're trying to raise money, when you're trying to sell a product, don't be afraid to ask. The last thing I want to touch on here, and then I have a couple principles to kick us off into the rest of the conference, but it's just know how to evaluate success. We do have data online. The internet provides a way for us to know what works and what doesn't. So we need to set out what success means at the beginning of our experiments, have the metrics to track that, and then test and analyze those metrics to really figure out what piece is working and what doesn't. And if you don't set up this infrastructure, you leave this on the table. And we really can't afford to leave it on the table with an industry evolving as fast as ours is. So a couple of rules to live by as you move into the rest of your discussions for the day. The first is be interesting. When you are on the internet, you are competing with cats. There are cats all over the internet, and people love cats. They always like cat photos. They always participate when there are cats. So you have to be more interesting than this cat. And if you aren't, you will lose. Be interesting. Keep being interesting. Keep changing. And remember this face when you're tired of being interesting. You can't afford to be. The second, be authentic. People receive information from people. And when they're on the internet, There are people behind the internet, and they know that. So be authentic with your organization, be authentic with your cause, and be authentic with your brand. And think about what that means in terms of from the moment people hit your website, the moment people download your app, the moment people see you or interact with you on social media. Your messages can't be different on different platforms. They've got to be authentic. We often found in 2012, we often find now with organizations that we work with, that posting that like photo that's not very good of everyone sitting around a table eating pizza in your office does really well, right? Not all the time, but every once in a while, because people want to know who you are. And you have the opportunity to tell them who you are. So do that in an authentic way. The third, be engaging. Unlike this guy. Right? Be engaging. Think about what people want to hear. Think about how people interact as people, and be engaging and switch that up. And the last thing is don't be afraid to take risks. Everything that we do today came from people taking risks. The definition of technology is, or the history of technology is people trying things. And sometimes those things won't work. But sometimes they'll be your $1 million idea. So if you don't try and if you don't take risks, what you do will get stale, and people will get over it, and we need to keep innovating. And so don't be afraid to take the risks that get you there. Have a fantastic rest of your conference, and thanks so much for having me.